This past Saturday morning, I ended up sleeping in a little later than usual. When I finally rolled over to give my wife of 17 years, Lisa, a gentle morning kiss, she groaned. "Oh, not again, Mike. You never give me a break, day or night." Then she mumbled something about the kids. "Aren't they up by now?" I chuckled and reassured her. "They're not little anymore. They're not about to come running in." Still, I got out of bed, threw on my robe, and headed to the bathroom. As I passed our older daughter Sarah's room, I heard some playful bickering. Her younger sister, Katie, was doing her best to pull her out of bed. I decided to let them work it out. After freshening up and getting dressed, I made my way to the kitchen. By the time I arrived, both girls were already at the table, looking a bit impatient. Sarah, always the outspoken one, asked, "So, breakfast, Dad?" Katie chimed in. "Yeah, we're starving, and don't we have school today?" I laughed, realizing they'd completely forgotten. "School? You girls are on winter break. Today, you're going to Grandma's." Katie looked disappointed and asked if I'd be off work too. I reminded her. "Your mom's running the show this weekend." With a sigh, Katie mumbled something about how they could make breakfast if their mom didn't worry so much about them wrecking the kitchen. I grinned, suggesting oatmeal or maybe some semolina porridge. Sarah quickly voted for oatmeal, so I got started on that. While I was cooking, Lisa finally joined us, looking as beautiful as she did the day we met, even after all these years. She reminded the girls to eat up since I'd be taking them to Grandma's soon. Sarah looked disappointed. "But Mom, you promised we'd go to the ski resort this week." "We've been looking forward to it," Lisa answered quickly. "Plans changed, sweetheart. We'll go in spring." Honestly, I wasn't too thrilled about sending the girls to my mother-in-law's either. Something felt off. Ever since Lisa started working with her new boss, Ben, she'd seemed distant. They'd been friends in college, but she never mentioned him much, which only made me more uneasy. I wanted to trust her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. To ease my mind, I slipped a small recorder into my pocket that morning, hoping it would give me some clarity. After breakfast, I stepped into the bathroom, turned on the recorder, and then headed back to the kitchen. Lisa was there, sitting silently, lost in her thoughts. Then, out of nowhere, she looked up at me and said, "Mike, we need to talk." Just hearing those words, I knew this wasn't going to be an easy conversation. I took a deep breath, trying to prepare myself. "All right, Lisa, what's on your mind?" She started slowly, as if carefully choosing her words. "You know I love you, right? I always have. But lately, I've been thinking a lot about us, about where we're heading. I don't want us to drift apart." Her words were vague, but they weighed heavy. "Lisa, what are you trying to say here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though I felt a knot of worry forming. She took another deep breath and looked down. "I've been reading about relationships, about how people grow apart. I don't want us to end up like that. I think maybe we need a break, just a little time apart, to figure things out separately." I was stunned. "A break? How long are we talking, days, weeks?" My mind was reeling. "Oh no, nothing drastic," she replied quickly. "Just a few days. I thought maybe a long weekend over the holiday break would be enough." Suddenly, everything clicked. "So, that's why the girls are going to your mom's instead of us going on that ski trip we promised?" She tried to play it down. "We could have sent them to your parents. I just thought my mom's was more convenient." I couldn't hold back anymore. "So you and Ben came up with this little idea, huh? Just a harmless break so you two can spend the weekend together?" Lisa's face went pale, and she shook her head. "What? No, this has nothing to do with Ben. You're blowing this out of proportion." But the look on her face told me more than words ever could. "Don't lie to me, Lisa. I'm not stupid. It's him, isn't it? Your new boss, the guy you reconnected with from college." Lisa looked away, gathering her thoughts before saying, "Mike, you're reading too much into this. Nothing's changed between us. I still love you. This is about giving each other space, that's all. Nothing's changed?" I almost laughed at the absurdity. Everything's changed, Lisa. You don't act the same around me, and the girls notice it too. She softened her tone, almost pleading. Mike, I'm not saying we're over. I just want us to have a breather to keep things strong. Divorce wasn't something I'd ever imagined, but suddenly, it was the only thing I could think about. I looked Lisa straight in the eyes, the hurt and sense of betrayal clear in my voice. How do you plan on explaining all this to the girls if we end up splitting up? She brushed it off quickly. We're not getting divorced, Mike. This is just a short break, nothing more. The girls don't need to be involved. I shook my head. Lisa, reading a sociology book is one thing, but this plan of yours is tearing everything apart. She let out a sigh, clearly frustrated. Fine, let's shelve this for now. Just take the girls to my mom's, and we'll talk when you get back. I got up, my heart racing. No, Lisa, there's nothing left to discuss. I turned and started walking toward the door. You can't just leave like this, she called out, her voice almost desperate. Oh, I absolutely can, I replied without looking back. Enjoy your weekend, Lisa. As I walked out, the pain in my chest was almost unbearable, but I knew I'd made up my mind. There was no going back. I grabbed my keys, took a deep breath, and headed to the car where the girls were already waiting, blissfully unaware of the storm raging inside me. As I started the engine and pulled out, silence hung heavy between us until finally, Sarah broke it. Dad, isn't Grandma's house the other way? I glanced at her in the rearview mirror, forcing a smile. Yes, sweetheart, but plans have changed. Remember when we talked about going to the ski resort? Well, that's where we're headed. Both girls' faces lit up, though I could tell they sensed something was off. A few more quiet moments passed before Katie, the younger one, asked softly, Dad, are you and Mom, are you getting divorced? Her question hit harder than I expected, and I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. Why would you think that, honey? Sarah, always sharp, chimed in. We heard you and Mom arguing this morning. I don't know. I'm on your side, Dad. And so is Katie. I took a shaky breath, doing my best to keep calm. Girls, I won't lie to you. Your mom and I are going through a rough patch, and we need to work through some things. But I want you both to know, no matter what happens, I'll always be here for you. Always. For the rest of the drive, I tried to keep things light, talking about the ski trip and the fun we'd have. Deep down, though, I was grappling with the reality I'd just walked out on. Betrayal, a feeling I never thought I'd know, had crept in, and I was determined to keep the girls shielded from it as much as I could. We'd figure out the rest after the holiday. Right now, all I wanted was to give them a happy memory. Meanwhile, back home, Lisa was apparently facing her own fallout. Later, I found out that right after we left, she called Ben in a panic, telling him things hadn't gone as she'd planned. Mike knows about us, she'd said, her voice shaking. I wasn't there to hear Ben's reaction, of course, but I could imagine it. Ben wasn't exactly known for his reliability. His own marriage was already falling apart. His wife, Karen, had picked up on his reputation long before he and Lisa rekindled whatever they once had. From what I gathered, Ben wasn't too concerned about anyone but himself. He tried to calm Lisa, telling her to stick to the story. Just tell him it's a break, Lisa. Let his anger cool off. He'll come around. But I knew Lisa was starting to question it all. She knew I wasn't naive, and she knew I wouldn't just sit around in silence. Alone in the kitchen, Lisa's mind must have been spinning. She didn't want a divorce, at least that's what she told herself. But she couldn't let go of the pull she felt toward Ben, that excitement she thought had long disappeared. Maybe she thought she could juggle it all, that somehow it would work out if she just handled things carefully. But she didn't realize I'd already moved past trust. The moment I walked out that door, I decided we were over. The girls and I were going to make the most of this ski trip. And when we got back, she'd have to face the consequences of her choices. We pulled into the ski resort later that afternoon, and an old buddy of mine, Matt, greeted us. I'd called him during the drive, explaining just enough for him to understand that I needed a quiet spot, away from everything. Matt, as dependable as always, set us up in a cozy cabin near the main lodge. As soon as we settled in, Sarah and Katie, still bubbling with excitement despite the morning's tension, started planning our time there: skiing, ice skating, and even a dance that Matt mentioned was happening that night. Seeing their smiles gave me a much-needed distraction from the mess waiting back home, at least for a little while. Once the girls were out of earshot, Matt leaned in. "Where's Lisa?" he asked quietly. I just looked at him, and he got the message. "All right, that's a conversation for later. For now, let's enjoy tonight." We raised a glass to old friendships, sharing stories of our younger days, reminiscing about times when everything felt simpler. Soon enough, a young staff member came by to take Sarah and Katie to the dance, leaving Matt and me alone to finally get into what was really going on. "So, what's happening with Lisa?" Matt asked, his concern clear. I sighed, trying to sort through the tangled mess in my head. "It's her new boss, Ben. Turns out, they were more than just old college friends. Well, let's just say she thought taking a break this weekend would somehow help our marriage. Her idea of fixing things, apparently." Matt shook his head, disbelief all over his face. "A break? That sounds like a messed up way to save a marriage." He paused, then looked at me, searching my face. "So, are you really going through with the divorce?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I don't see any other way. I thought I knew her. I thought I could trust her, but it turns out I was just blind." I paused, struggling to keep my emotions steady. "And it wasn't even a physical affair. But somehow, that doesn't make it any easier." Matt leaned back, sympathy written all over his face. "Sometimes, it's those emotional betrayals that hurt the worst." We kept talking, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a weight lift. Just having someone who understood, who really got it, made a difference. Eventually, the girls returned from the dance, their cheeks flushed with excitement. For those few hours that night, we managed to escape the shadows that had been hanging over us, just enjoying each other's company. When we finally wound down for the night, I tucked the girls in bed, watching them settle in before heading to bed myself. But as I lay there alone, the weight of the day crept back in. I pulled out the small recorder I'd brought along, replaying Lisa's words from that morning. Each sentence, every dismissive tone, only solidified what I already knew in my gut: I wasn't going back to her, not after this. Meanwhile, back home, Lisa was scrambling. She tried calling my parents, hoping to get some clue about where I'd taken the girls. When that didn't work, she even reached out to her own family. Her desperation was starting to show, and I could picture her realizing her plan hadn't just gone wrong, it had blown up completely. But none of it mattered to me anymore. My mind was made up, and I felt oddly at peace with it. The next morning, the girls woke me up bright and early, excited for a full day on the slopes. Their energy was infectious, filling me with a sense of purpose. If nothing else, I was determined to give them this one happy memory. After breakfast, we rented some skis and took the lift up the mountain, spending the morning gliding down the slopes, laughing, and enjoying the fresh, crisp air. For the first time in years, I felt free. The heaviness I'd been carrying around for so long had lifted, replaced by a sense of clarity. At lunch, we met up with Matt and his wife, who offered to take the girls ice skating in the afternoon so Matt and I could meet with a lawyer friend of his. It was time to start moving things forward with the divorce. In the quiet of Matt's office, the lawyer walked me through everything. She was clear and compassionate, explaining my rights, what the custody arrangements could look like, and the details of dividing assets, like our family's apartment. She advised me to avoid making any rushed decisions about the apartment, reminding me that the girls would eventually need their own space, no matter what happened. When we wrapped up, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. This wasn't a road I ever thought I'd be on, but here I was, taking control of a future that, at least for me and the girls, felt more stable. That night, we joined Matt and his wife at the lodge for a New Year's celebration. There was music, laughter, and even a little dance floor where the girls twirled around with other kids. For a few hours, the weight of my marriage felt like it belonged to someone else, and I let myself just be a dad, soaking up these moments with my daughters. Back in the cabin, I tucked the girls in, making sure they were warm and comfortable before heading to bed. But as soon as I was alone, reality hit me all over again. The memories of Lisa's betrayal, her casual suggestion of a break, and the way she dismissed everything we built together, it all flooded back. I knew I was ready for the next step, ready to sever ties with the woman I once thought I'd spend my life with. I realized it was going to be a long, messy road ahead, especially with the girls caught in the middle. But they deserved better than the fractured version of family life Lisa had tried to impose on us. And meanwhile, Lisa was still back home, probably starting to realize just how deep of a mess she'd made. From what I'd heard, Lisa was reaching out to anyone who'd listen, trying to track us down. But I'd made sure no one would let her know where we'd gone. For once, the silence was mine, and I was holding on to it. When I finally drifted off that night, there was a calm in me that I hadn't felt in years. Tomorrow would bring a new year, a new start, and it was time to leave the old life behind. At dawn, we packed up, ready for the road back home. The drive was filled with light-hearted chatter as the girls recounted their favorite moments of the trip, laughing about the ski slopes, the ice rink, and every little memory we made together. When we finally pulled into the driveway, the sun was dipping low, casting long shadows over the yard. The girls went straight to their rooms, jumping back into their routines like nothing had changed. But I knew things would never be the same. Not long after, Lisa came home. I could see the mix of emotions on her face: anger, confusion, and maybe even a touch of regret. She was desperate to talk, but I had made my decision. Every time she tried to steer the conversation back towards some kind of reconciliation, I shut it down, keeping my answers short and distant. Once the girls were settled in for the night, I returned to the kitchen where she was waiting, her expression caught between desperation and defiance. "Why are you doing this, Jim?" she asked, voice strained. "Why can't we just talk it through?" I met her gaze, my voice steady and firm. "We're way past talking, Lisa. I needed honesty from you, and this is what you gave me instead. You wanted a break? Well, you've got it now." She tried to soften her tone, stepping closer. "Jim, it wasn't what you think. I never meant for it to go this far. I lost myself." I shook my head, refusing to be swayed. "Lost yourself? Is that what we're calling it now? Let's be real, Lisa. You planned to step away from us to see if you'd find a spark somewhere else, and you thought I'd be too blind to catch on." Her face went pale as she realized just how much I knew. "It wasn't like that, I swear," she murmured, but I was done with her explanations. A week later, as the divorce process kicked off, the girls and I fell into a new rhythm. Lisa had visitation, but the girls were hesitant, trying to reconcile the mother they'd known with this new version of her who had nearly torn our family apart. A gap had opened up between them, and though Lisa tried to bridge it, the damage was done. Our court date came up faster than I expected. Lisa was still in disbelief, trying to push back against the custody arrangements I'd proposed. But the judge didn't budge. I could see the resignation in her face as the ruling was read out: primary custody to me, with visitation rights for her. She barely glanced my way as we left the courtroom. I imagined she thought she'd have more control over how this would end, but now it was clear she'd lost more than she'd ever bargained for. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding. The girls, resilient as they were, settled into our new life, and we found a rhythm that worked for us. Lisa faded to the background, visiting now and then but finding it hard to reconnect with the girls. That closeness they once shared had been replaced with a quiet distance that she couldn't bridge. A year later, on New Year's Eve, we returned to the ski resort. My old friend Matt and his family joined us again, and for the first time since everything had fallen apart, I felt genuine peace. The hurt had finally faded, replaced by a strength I hadn't known I had. Lisa's chapter in my life had closed, but new ones were just beginning. With my daughters by my side, I knew whatever came next, we'd face it together, stronger than ever. Thank you for tuning in and for all the support you've shown on my YouTube channel. Your encouragement and feedback mean the world to me. Stay tuned for more stories to come.